Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another World of Tanks console kind of tank review, tank discussion. And today we're talking about a really popular and really special one, which is the German Tier 10 medium tank, the Leopard 1, the stablemate to the classic and original Tier 10 German medium tank, the E50M. Leopard 1 is a very unique kind of a play style in the world of tanks, and maybe not so much unique, but definitely pretty well defined and really obvious to understand if you just kind of take some time to look at some of the stats on the vehicle. Because this is a medium tank that foregoes armor almost completely and gives it all up for incredible mobility and a really fantastic gun, which you're really going to see here in some of these replays I got for you guys today. So when Leopard 1 came to the console version of World of Tanks, it wasn't necessarily a really long ways into the game. It was maybe 2 or 3 years into the game's release. We got the Leopard 1 and this whole alternate medium line of German tanks that led up to this thing. And it was an instant hit because first and foremost, let's just get out of the way. This thing looks it looks incredible. It is a beautiful tank to look at. In real life, it was kind of a legendary tank that came out in the mid 20th century when main battle tanks were kind of the flavor of tanks everyone was moving towards post World War II. And the Americans had their M48 and M60 series of patent tanks. The British had their Centurion lines that eventually kind of moved towards Chieftains, and then the Germans pursued the Leopard line of tanks, which are still around today in the form of the very modern version of Leopards. Leopard 4s, Leopard 5s, and all that stuff. And they're very competent, potent tanks. And this guy right here is also playing Leopard in this game. And even though you are fast, that is not how you play a Leopard. You do not just go full yellow in the first couple of minutes. So I said this thing has no armor. It looks kind of big. So what kind of armor are we talking about? Well, the front plate, although kind of sloped, is 70 millimeters, and you are at tier 10. And I had a massive lag spike right here, right as I was about to kill that Leopard 1. Of course, that's when it was going to happen. And then right afterwards, I believe I get a shot here on the side of a C-114 turret that bounces. Gotta love when that happens, but 70 millimeter upper plate on this thing, which is not bad whatsoever if you're how do I put this? You don't rely on it, but it gets some pretty funny bounces. And you might see one. I think I've already blocked one. Yeah, I've already blocked 750 damage, and that was a shot from the 60 TP that bounced off this thing. So it's not quite auto pen levels of armor, but yeah, it's really not armor. Okay, it's there to troll enemies, kind of like a Bat Chat's frontal plate that's just thick enough to not be overmatched to really instill some rage in people when they do bounce off you sometimes. But that's this thing's upper front plate. The side armor is completely useless. It's 25 millimeters, and as we've discussed, when it comes to overmatching, that pretty much means every single tank gun that you're going to meet from tier 10 to tier 8 is going to have enough caliber to go ahead and overmatch you. So you literally cannot side scrape. Don't even try baiting shots at extreme angles. If people hit the side of this thing, they are going to penetrate, and that you're really playing the tank wrong if you think you're going to be moving up and baiting shots and getting any sort of use or effect out of this armor. You're going to find yourself having a really frustrating time. The turret is kind of a similar situation to the upper front plate. It is, I think, the thickest part of the armor. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and check really quick. Give me 1 second here, guys. I think it's 50 millimeters at the thickest part of the turret. Correction. The gun mantlet, you're looking at 65 millimeters. The kind of sides of the turret are 60, and then the rest of the front's 52. So certainly not very thick armor whatsoever. And the gun mantlet does gun mantlet things from time to time. And by that, obviously, funky angles, magic, spaced armor nonsense. But most of the time, this is not a tank you can play a hold down and expect to ricochet shots. You'll be penned in the face multiple times over and over. So even though you are a big tank and a quote unquote main battle tank, this thing is absolutely not armored whatsoever. So what do you get for exchange and for giving up all that armor? Well, what you get is really crazy mobility. So when this thing came to the game, 65 kilometers an hour top speed, which is, I mean, blazingly fast and was only really rivaled by the Batchat in terms of the other tier 10 medium tanks in the game at the time, because Russian mediums like the T-62 and Object 140, I believe, were like 50 and 55 kilometers respectively. We've talked about the Patton, the FE4202, how slow those things were. The E50M could go pretty quick, close to 60 kilometers an hour, but that thing had nowhere near the amount of horsepower to ton ratio this thing does. I mean, you're seeing me fly across this field at faster than 65 kilometers an hour. We'll kind of talk about that when the time comes. So your hypermobility, and that kind of makes sense. You have a very powerful engine and very little armor to weigh you down. So you can really flex this thing and move around the battlefield. That is, I mean, effectively light tank standards of mobility for a medium tank, which is really attractive to a lot of people who liked mobile tanks in the game. And tier 10, outside of, like I said, the Batchat wasn't really there at the time. And the Batshot was kind of a different tank because that had an autoloader, so you had long periods of downtime as opposed to a single shot cannon with good DPM, kind of like the Leopard 1 had. And speaking of that cannon, what was that cannon like? Well, it was kind of like your standard tier 10 105, but just a little bit different. So 268 millimeters penetration. It's the kind of classic 105 millimeter Western style tier 10 medium tank gun, like the Patton, like the FE4202, etc. So you have great shell velocity. At the time, you had 390 alpha damage, and you had some pretty solid DPM. You weren't actually pumping out as much damage as, say, an M48 Patton that did have a higher rate of fire with the same alpha damage, but you were definitely north of something like an E50M. So the DPM was solid, but it wasn't best in class by any means. What was absolutely phenomenal about this gun, and still is to this day, was the accuracy. This German medium tank is all about getting to a position and affecting the game with incredibly accurate fire, very similar to the E50M, but you actually have better rate of fire. So in effect, you have that really strong German accuracy and the DPM to really kind of farm tanks and make them think twice about either pushing you or exposing themselves, and you can really add quite a bit of firepower to a flank with this thing. So you're going to see here in this game, this is quite a bit of a longer game, and it does not start out very well whatsoever. But I think this game, and certainly the last game I'm going to show you guys, really kind of shows you how this tank can win games, and it's all about preserving your hit points at the beginnings of games, because this tank becomes more and more and more dangerous as the game goes on. And as tanks start dying off on the enemy team, you start getting a lot more avenues. You could start working flanks more. You could start taking more aggressive positions because there's not as much vision on the map. Because you definitely want to play this thing in a very stealthy manner. So on top of the good gun and the good mobility, this tank always had pretty solid camo. It's not best in class. It's not as good as, say, a K91, which I think is probably the most stealthy medium tank at tier 10. I could be wrong on that, but it did have a pretty significant camo buff. And that thing, I believe, stationary has around 270 meters of still concealment. My Leopard 1 is sitting just in the realm of around 290, 295, something like that, which is perfectly acceptable if you're trying to play a medium tank in a stealthy fashion. And it's all about staying on that second line support and using foliage and cover and things like that. You really don't want to get spotted with the Leopard because people know that you're a big target and you have very little armor. And if there's one thing people in this game like, it's easy penetrations. Shooting at something like a hold down E100 angling his turret. A lot of people don't really want to shoot at that, but a Leopard hold down or not hold down, no one really cares. They will absolutely focus you, as you see here. And I just take two hits in rapid succession there. And like I said, that upper front plate and manlet might be trolled from time to time, but you certainly cannot rely upon them. So this thing was very fast. It was stealthy, had a very accurate gun. It had no armor. So that right there was kind of the recipe for how you're going to play this tank. You were going to sit back and kind of snipe towards the beginning of games. You're going to try to get what damage you could. And as games go on, you almost act like a pseudo scout because while you can't really out spotlight tanks, even though you do have good view range and concealment, your concealment obviously is not as good as light tanks to begin with. And then you don't have that wonderful light tank bonus of being able to sit still. Have still concealment while moving. Your concealment does bloom on this. So I highly recommend running camo as well as the The silent driving equipment, it's definitely what I run on my Leopard. Really helps you move around the battlefield, really stretch those legs and get to positions without being spotted so you can surprise tanks and also catch them off guard. So this tank was pretty good when it came out. Now, it is a tank that I think more than others is fairly well to have fairly easy, I should say, to have kind of bad games in. And this tank really is map dependent because it is a very specialized machine. Unlike something, say, like a Centurion Action 10, which has a wonderful combination of armor, mobility, firepower, gun depression, view range, all the things that means you're really kind of flexible on most maps you play on. This tank is absolutely specialized in these kind of open maps like Fisherman's Bay you see me playing on right here. And, you love to see maps like Prokhorovka, Malinovka, just big, vast open maps where you could exploit your view range and camo advantage and kind of keep enemies at a distance. Because once you get into close combat with a Leopard, it's not to say that you can't, but you definitely need quite a bit of support and quite a bit of luck because you're so easy to kill. You don't have that much hit points for a tier 10. 1950s on the lower end when it comes to tier 10 mediums. And you can't rely on your armor to make those hit points kind of last and go the distance. So if you get a map, think like Ensk or Himmelsdorf or one of those kind of classic in your face brawling maps, or maybe even a map that is kind of a 3-lane map. Something that comes to mind is Mountain Pass. I really don't like playing Mountain Pass on my Leopard, unfortunately, because it's really hard to advance the game without running face first into tanks. Those are the maps you could really struggle to do with this thing, and you're not going to have as much of an impact. But in a situation like this, you can see right here the Leopard 1 is really good at retreating on a falling flank, and then also kind of setting up an ambush, right? This thing really is a fun ambushing tank because you can move so fast, people are going to see you running away, and they're going to think, oh, perfect, I can go chase him, and next thing you know, they don't realize that you stopped, relocated, and now you're setting up an ambush, which is kind of what you're going to see me do here. And this game right here, we're down quite a bit of health, as you can see up there, and we almost completely lost map control. They own easily 70% of this map right now. And I'm not thinking at this point that I'm really going to win. I've only done 2,000 damage, got no kills, and just trying to get what I can out of this game. But it actually turns out to be quite an entertaining second half, which the Leopard 1 is definitely they had us in the first half, not going to lie, kind of a tank, right? This thing really does like it when games go the distance, so it could really exploit its strengths. So, along with a lot of tanks that have been around in the game for quite some time, the Leopard 1 certainly had its issues, and it's not necessarily just its armor. I kind of talked in the FV4 202 video how the British 105s had this ridiculous problem with bloom, and even though their fully aimed accuracy, that is when you're stopped, completely got your reticle to its smallest point, was impressive. The real big issue with those tanks was the fact that once you moved the turret or the tank or rotated the hull, the bloom meant that you really couldn't snap shots too well. And I talked about how on the FE4202 that was a real problem because you don't have great, not great or even really good enough armor. But that really kind of doubles down for the Leopard. This machine did not have the gun you're seeing in the game right here in terms of its handling. It had pretty crazy bloom, and if you didn't aim all the way, it had this tendency to just shoot all the way at the edge of the reticle, and that reticle was a fairly sizable, I guess, size on your screen, right? When you try to snap those shots, and it didn't feel good. And I've had this tank for many years at this point, and I really do remember me just not really enjoying the tank as much as I thought I would because the truth is that the play style that you need with this tank is to have a very reliable, very dependable gun to make up for the fact that you're not as flexible. And this tank really just didn't have it. So, along with some of the other tanks we've talked about in my kind of mini series here, I guess you can call it, this was one of the tech trees that went through a reforge. So the German tier 10 medium tank didn't have too many crazy substantial changes to it. It wasn't a crazy DPM buff or any sort of penetration buff, hard stats. But what they did was they increased the forward speed limit from 65 kph up to 68, which is nice. It's 3 kilometers an hour. It's not necessarily game changing, but every bit of speed definitely helps when you're trying to run away from a falling flank, trying to rush early positions, or just relocate generally through the course of a battle. The other thing they did was there was the biggest change and the biggest buff to this is they took the chassis dispersion during movement from 0.14 to 0.08. And these numbers, I mean, I won't pretend to fully understand them, but what I can tell you is that 0.14 to 0.08 effectively means they almost cut it in half, right? So that was your dispersion when you're moving, and they also cut the dispersion during rotation from 0.14 to 0.08 as well. So your dispersion when you're moving and rotating the tank, it was basically cut in half. You have twice the gun handling you did before, which was just such a massive buff to this machine because you really can't afford to sit still and aim if you're spotted or if you're playing a hold down position where you're trying to bait shots out or just trying to move into cover while shooting with a ridiculous amount of dispersion. And that really changed how well you could do in this machine. The other thing they did was they changed some of the shell velocity values. It used to have APCR and heat back when this was a 390 damage gun. Buffed that a little bit so it has really good shell velocity on its APCR. It's heat at the time and it's HE. And that was pretty much enough of a buff to kind of leave it as is because this machine, when it had a gun that was way, way more consistent and had kind of the firing on the move capabilities of, say, like an M48 Patton, as well as the phenomenal accuracy of, say, an E50M or a Centurion or an FE4202, that basically meant that outside of pretty much everything except for damage per minute, this pretty much was, and in some ways still kind of is, the best tier 10 medium tank gun. I mean, it's laser accurate. You can see how small the reticle is on your screen right now when you're fully aimed. So if you have to snipe cupolas on hold down tanks or really small targets from distance, this tank is right at home at that. It's a great sniper. And if you're on the move, running away or pushing in advance, and you need to fire on the move while you're moving between cover, this tank is also phenomenal at doing that, just like a Patton is. And this gun right here is really what it should have been the whole time without all that nonsense dispersion. So you're seeing right here that we've kind of turned this game around. We were definitely losing that game a little bit ago when I was talking about it. And just by using my concealment to run away from that western flank to stop the push from that Conway and that WZ 11114, we were really able to stop the bleeding on that flank, so to speak, and actually turn the tides. And you saw me outplay that FV405 with my camouflage, and then with this mobility here, I was able to get to a position and that Centauro didn't really expect me at because he didn't detect me until he pushed, thinking someone further back was spotting him. But I actually had the mobility to move forward to that rock and kind of caught him in an awkward spot. And now we're just looking for the very last tank in the game. And, this wasn't necessarily a monster score or I mean, I'll spoil it. It wasn't even a mastery game per se, but you really saw, and there's that troll armor right there I'm talking about. But you really saw this game how you can effectuate a late game impact far, far greater than maybe other medium tanks even can. I think honestly, outside of autoloaders, this might be the most impactful late game medium because you have the tools to outplay. And that was a really embarrassing shot right there before I died. But thankfully, we kind of have this game in the bag right here. The team did do pretty well. So the last kind of significant change that the Leopard 1 underwent before any other of the tier 10 or tier 9 mediums was this was the first 105 mil gun to get a buff to 420 alpha from 390. Now this was really cool at the time, and I've talked about that change quite a bit. So I'll just talk about the Leopard and that kind of period where it was very unique because this tank wants to be a sniper, as we've discussed. Good view range, camo, and armor, and an accurate gun means you are a perfect platform for sniping. And with 420 alpha damage, it just kind of accentuated that role a little bit, right? Because, like we've talked about in the past, if you're going to be sniping in a machine, there's very few times, certainly in the beginning and sometimes in the middle of games, that you have the opportunity to really fire on reload and use DPM. What you want in those situations where you're only getting one shot at a time is you want as much upfront punch as you can because the target you just shot is going to fall back into cover. And even though this was an accurate gun, it had the same alpha as all the mediums. So in a way, you can kind of snipe with a Centurion Action 10 or an E50M or any other tier 10 medium tank really without too much difference outside of maybe the accuracy to a degree. But when this was the only tier 10 medium with a 105 with this level of accuracy and shell velocity with increased alpha at 420, that made this de facto kind of the best tier 10 medium tank sniper in the game. And it was really kind of cool. It was a change that followed in the footsteps of the PC version, and a welcome change at that, in my opinion. And they implemented that in console. And during that time as well, they removed the heat rounds. You went from 330 heat to, I believe, 323 millimeters of APC premium APCR pen. And since you have standard APCR shells as well, this kind of makes it one of those tanks where if you really want to and you don't care about credits or integrity and honor, however you want to phrase it, you could, a lot of people really do spam full gold in this, and there's no downside. So, uh, that's it's a way you could play. I don't particularly like it. I like to make standard shells work. I think the game is a lot more enjoyable with standard shell penetration values in mind. It doesn't devalue armor so much, and but it's at the end of the day, it's kind of your game. You play how you want. I'm not gonna ever gonna hate the player. I will gladly hate the game though. Unfortunately, that period wasn't too long lived, and in today's World of Tanks in 2026, we have it so that once again, this has the same alpha damage as those aforementioned tanks with 105s. So it's not quite unique and special anymore, but it's still a game. Excuse me, a tank that could do very, very well in this game and do quite a bit of damage, as you've seen in these past couple of games. And we're going to talk about a bit about this game here. So we're playing here on Safe Haven, not necessarily one of my favorite maps, and I'm looking here at what we have over here for tanks, what the enemy has for tanks. I'm really not liking the position that we're in. It's pretty evident they've brought a bit more armor, and they're playing a bit more aggressively than our tanks are. And in my head, I'm already kind of thinking here, like, all right, there's going to be a point where I need to fall back because they have sniper support in the back as well as a good amount of meat up front, and we're not getting the vision on the guys in the back, and their tanks are pushing, right? So their snipers can easily counter snipe us, and you can see our tanks are already kind of falling. So it's at this point where I make the decision, all right, it's time to fall back. And if you look at the scoreboard, we're down a tank, we're down some health, and that's kind of going to keep getting worse here shortly. And I really didn't have high hopes for this game, and unfortunately, you can't really make impactful plays, like I said at the start of the game, because if I was to rush down there with the rest of our tanks in that central valley by the cap, I don't have the armored brawl. I'm just going to be a little bit of an XP pinata and maybe get 2 shots off and then die. So you'll see me falling back here quite a bit. And I'm kind of resigned at this point to just go ahead and say that, all right, look, we're down 2 tanks. They have a lot more health than us. We're not going to win this game. I'm just going to go ahead and get what I can out of it, and we'll go ahead and call it a day. And unfortunately, that shot missed, and I wasn't really in a great mood during this point of the game. I really don't like vanguards, and thankfully that second shot did go in, but I'm still spotted here, so it's kind of delaying my retreat. And as you can see here, everyone has died. I got out of there just in time, and you have to be pretty proactive with your movements with the Leopard because if you wait too long, you are fast, but you're a big target. And if you're spotted in the open, you are going to get shot up regardless how fast you're going. So we only have a FE405 back up there. I crashed into this wall because, it owes me money or something, and got a couple shots in here, and I said, well, at the end of the day, it is what it is. This just wasn't a game for us to win. We're losing map control quickly, and I'm taking what shots I can. I have a pretty long range shot on this Object 268 here, but I mean that's a easy shot for this gun. Wasn't even fully aimed, and he was about that's like what 480 meters away. I mean, I I hit those shots all day with this gun. I got no problems with that. And right here, you're going to see me fall back into kind of the corner of the map. Here, you got some bushes and some hard cover, and this is gonna be my last stand right here. You're gonna see this Panzerjäger come up with me to this position as well. He's kind of thinking the same thing. We're both 2 tanks that just don't have any armor whatsoever, so there's no point us trying to hold our ground against what's coming to us. We're just going to lose that fight completely. We may as well make them work for it by using our camo and our long range firepower against whoever's chasing us, because that's really gonna make him pay dearly for it, so to speak. So I'm sitting here now, and just like that, even though it looked pretty bad and it's not looking great, the tanks that we had that went to the center, they've actually done a pretty good job getting a foothold here. And it's now we're only down 2 tanks, and yeah, we have a lot less health. But I'm looking at the health they're on. I'm on full health. I'm thinking, you know what? Now we're gonna move down, and I'm not in comms with this guy, this Panzerjäger, but you're gonna see us work just tremendously well as a team here. And we both decide, all right, let's go ahead and support these guys because they're still in the fight. And if they're still in the fight, that means that we can bring our firepower to go ahead and support him. And again, you're just seeing the mobility of the Leopard being such a massive strength because I started all the way in the southern corner, moved all the way to the northern corner where I'm at. Now I'm moving all the way to the middle, and it doesn't take me long whatsoever to get there. And the Panzerjägers kind of follow me here, and these guys are pushing aggressively because they have the numbers advantage, but they don't realize that suddenly a Leopard is on their ass, and we're putting in some good shots here, trying to get some of the pressure and relief off the friendly tanks that are sitting here, and they're kind of realizing it now that they're kind of pincered. Unfortunately, they get the last, so now it's a 2v5. If it was just me, it'd be a Kolovanov's game, but it is only a 2v, or sorry, it's a 2v5 instead of a 1v5, and we have our work cut out for us here. The Panzerjäger makes a sensational play. He's going long. If he just sat here with me, we would not have won this game because the tanks that we're fighting would only have to worry about one angle to get shot from, and they could point their guns at us to pre-aim and angle their armor. So now I'm trying to mix up the angles a little bit as well as the Panzerjäger here is kind of getting his position going. And we're just going to kind of do this 1-2 punch where he pops out, then I pop out. We're kind of keeping them guessing where to move their guns. And the 268 rushes him, and I thought for sure he's dead here. So I'm trying to make him pay for it, but he gets a phenomenal shot into that machine there, so I'm able to take it out. So it was 2v5, now it's 2v3. And those last two tanks, I haven't seen them in quite some time. So now it's a Panzerjäger and I versus this Object 268, and he's a non-turreted tank destroyer, and this is not where you want to be in an Object 268 or any tank without a turret, because now he could just come on out, peekaboo, I shoot him, I'm going to sit out in the open to bait him to look at me, and then I'm going to fall back, which gives the Panzerjäger the opportunity to move forward. So I'm just going to peek around the corner here. If he wants to go ahead and look at me, he can and get killed by the Panzerjäger. But right here, I have the enemy Eradicator, I think that is. Yeah, the Eradicator. I think it's an auto-loading Carnarvon Action 10, basically. And that was a really sticky situation there. But together, we just managed, just in the nick of time, to go ahead and get that 268 out of the game. So now it's a 2v2. They have a bit more health, but I'm confident that we can win this game here because we've only seen one of them, so it's kind of a 2v1 at the moment. So he gets a great shot there into the Eradicator. He's technically a one-shot for me, but 420 alpha, 419 health, I mean, you're basically a 50-50, and then most heavy tanks in the game run the damage-reducing equipment, which means it's probably more about a 30% chance I'm going to one-shot him. So I went ahead and told the Panzerjäger, hold that corner, keep him distracted. Once again, that phenomenal mobility of the Leopard 1 giving me the opportunity to relocate quickly to go ahead and get behind this guy. And he's not going to see it coming. So we're really working well as a team here, even though we're not on comms. And it's pretty fun to roll the tanks when you just kind of mesh and do well with a friendly. So I solidify the shot there, make sure I don't miss it. And then the last tank, it's that tier 9 weird American heavy tank, the M6Y, I think is what it is. And he's pretty healthy. And here, unfortunately, I'm going to try my absolute best to support my Panzerjäger because he's just been an absolute rock star. And he's giving him the old ring around the rosy. And he's been playing his ass off this game. But unfortunately, as I come around the corner here, I'm going to shoot him. And then here in a second, he's going to take out my teammate, the Panzerjäger. But we've completely turned this game around and won it. I mean, just that was a completely lost game 9 out of 10 times. And if it wasn't for this guy right here supporting me and just playing very smart, intelligent, we were not going to win this game. So as much as I like to show this game, because I mean, 7,000 damage and 4 kills, about to be 5 kills, is a pretty crazy game. I could not have done that without him. And at the end of the day, it is a team game, and that's kind of what it's all about. So the Leopard 1, it's a deadly tier 10 medium tank. It fits very well into the meta of the game, being a specialized machine, having something really strong about it, being mobility and stealth. And there you have it. 5 kills, 7,188 damage. Only a first class mastery, but that's okay. That was a great game for me to share with you guys. I hope you guys liked it. And go ahead and tell what you guys think about the Leopard. This is a tank that's easy to love and maybe easy to hate depending on your playstyle, and certainly the map that you get. And other than that, I hope you guys take care of yourselves. And until we talk again, be easy. Thanks.